Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to unpack the fascinating and honestly largely forgotten evolution of what is literally the most invisible object on your desk right now. Seriously, we walk past them, we use them without a second thought, right? But the journey of the humble stapler, it's an absolutely incredible ride through human history, engineering, and design. You're going to love this.
Okay, let's dive into this. I want you to look at that little stapler sitting next to your keyboard right now. Go ahead, glance at it. It's so easy to just see it as, a cheap office supply. But actually, it's a genuine marvel of human design. It's a brilliant mechanical solution engineered to solve those everyday, pull-your-hair-out annoyances that literally plagued record keepers for centuries.
Just consider the sheer contrast here. Today, we've got these cheap, mass-market plastic staplers that you can grab for what, a few bucks? But this everyday tool actually started out as a super high-end, meticulously handcrafted device reserved entirely for French royalty. No way, right? The massive leap from a literal king's court to your messy home office actually explains a whole lot about our modern industrial world.
Section 1. Fit for a King, the 1700s origins.
So the earliest recorded stapling machine actually dates all the way back to the 18th century, and it's attributed to King Louis XV of France. See, he needed a way to securely fasten his official court documents, and legend has it that each staple was reportedly inscribed with the royal insignia. I mean, these definitely weren't those flimsy, mass-produced pieces of wire we use today. No, these were elite, custom-crafted pieces of solid metal. It was basically a bespoke symbol of power, used exclusively to bind the most important royal decrees. Talk about fancy office supplies.
Section 2. The Heavy Mechanical Pioneers, the Industrial Revolution. As we moved out of the royal courts and into the 1800s, the Industrial Revolution kicks in, and with it comes an absolute explosion of paperwork. And that sheer, overwhelming demand for efficient filing pushed the paper fastener out of the palace and right into a clunky, heavily mechanical age. In 1866, an inventor named George McGill got a patent for a small, bendable brass paper fastener. Now, you actually had to push the brass through the paper and bend the little legs back yourself. So, while it wasn't spring-loaded, it was an absolutely vital precursor to the modern staple. It proved that a single piece of pliable metal was the key. Just a few years later, things got a bit more heavy-duty. 2 pounds, to be exact. That was the sheer, massive bulk of the 1879 McGill single-stroke staple press. It was an absolute beast of a machine, taking up some heavy real estate on a desk. But despite its size, it holds the historical title of being the very first commercially successful stapling machine. The absolutely crucial point here is just how hilariously inefficient this process was by our modern standards. Picture this. If you were a 19th century office worker using this giant press, you had to manually insert one single staple into the machine. Then, you forcefully whack the lever to drive it through. And finally, you had to manually reload the whole thing all over again just to bind your next document. It was a slow, highly physical, exhausting chore. But tracing this evolution, the acceleration is just incredible. I mean, we jump from that simple brass fastener in 1866 to the heavy single-stroke press in 1879, advancing to the wire stitcher in 1895, hitting a major milestone with the frozen staple in 1923, and finally reaching the top-loading stapler in 1937. It shows exactly how quickly human ingenuity tackled a universal problem once the commercial demand was really there.
Now, right at the turn of the 20th century, the story becomes a lot more recognizable for us. In 1895, Thomas Briggs invented a machine that could cut and form staples right from a continuous reel of wire for the Boston Wire Stitcher Company. And why does that matter to us? Well, because Briggs's invention laid the literal groundwork for Bostitch. Yep, a brand that is very likely sitting on a desk near you right this second.
Section 3. Freezing the staple, the 1920s breakthrough.
Okay, so the 1920s is when the stapler finally sheds its clunky industrial baggage. In 1923, the Boston Wire Stitcher Company introduced the frozen staple. Now before this moment, loading a stapler meant handling an absolute nightmare of loose, tangled wires. Literally, if you dropped your box of staples, you were in for a terrible afternoon of untangling. But by freezing the staples together in a single rigid strip using just a little bit of glue, everything changed. This glue method was a massive paradigm shift. It's exactly what allowed for that long, spring-loaded magazine system that lets you fire dozens of staples today without ever reloading.
Section 4. The Swingline Revolution, Perfecting User Experience.
Our final historical jump brings us to 1937 and an inventor named Jack Linsky. Now, we have all felt the universal tear-your-hair-out frustration of a jammed stapler, right? But before Linsky's Swingline Speed Stapler No. 3, if your stapler jammed or even if you just needed to reload it, you usually had to take the entire machine apart. It was a total mechanical chore. Linsky changed that forever by designing a super simple top-loading hinge mechanism. You could suddenly just pop the top open and drop a strip of frozen staples right in. It was a monumental relief for office workers everywhere, and it set the gold standard that every single stapler uses to this very day.
So the next time you casually press down on your stapler, just take a second to remember King Louis XV, the 2-pound press, the tangled wires, and the frozen glue strips that made it all possible. Which brings us to our final thought. What other hidden histories are sitting on your desk right now? Seriously, think about the invisible, continuous ingenuity shaping the mundane objects all around you. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep looking closely at the world right in front of you.